Well, the Tigers are roaring again. The Eagles are no longer mucking around. The Saints outlasted the Buffaloes, and who knows what happened at Norbuilt on Sunday. The rain obscured everything. Gray, another interesting round of NTFL.
Wet day at Fred's Pass, David, wasn't it? We saw 13 goals kicked and Districts get home by less than 1 goal.
It was a terrible day, but one thing that stood out for me watching the vision, Gray. Let's have a look at some of the vision. We can see here that terrible conditions as we've seen, but it didn't stop this water carrier from still playing the good old-fashioned prank, spraying his mate. Let's have a look again in slow motion. Unbelievable. The kids still found it fascinating, but the weather was extraordinary, wasn't it, Gray?
First half, you can hardly see the players, and I'm sure the players would have preferred to be off the ground rather than on it. It was very wet out there at Norbuilt Oval.
District scraped across the line, and they take on Waratah this weekend in another must-win match for Southern Districts, Gray, to consolidate their spot in the top 3.
Yeah, it is a must-win. They'll be without Henry R. Moore, of course, who incurred the wrath of the tribunal during the week. He's been one of their key playmakers. But the word is that Richard Tambling will play this week. He's been named for the last 4 games, I think, and played probably one of them. But the word is that he definitely will play against Waratahs on the eve of the finals, David, because we're only 1 month out. And
Waratah, they are on the verge of becoming the least successful Waratah side in the club's history, so they'll be had to change that certainly.
Been a terrible run, 14 losses in a row, and they have to snap it against Southern Districts at Marara, so a big task.
Big game between Waratah and Southern Districts. Waratah, they were outrun by Wanderers during the Foundation Cup game, Gray, and that makes it 5 out of the last 6 for the Muck-Mucks. They're starting to really hit their straps at this time of the season. They take on the Tiwi Bombers on Saturday evening.
Yeah, huge game for both sides. I think they're 4th and 5th on the ladder right now. The loser, of course, will probably drop out depending on what happens in the Palmerston game, so there's a lot at stake.
And as you mentioned, the Tiwi Bombers, they weren't impressive at all in the first half. Then they turned it on for a half against Nightcliff. They've always been a little bit inconsistent in games, and on the weekend they're exposed for that inconsistency, Gray.
Could not get their game going for probably 2.5 quarters, Dave, and then the last quarter, we all know, they kicked 11 goals without a miss. So if those guys ever want to play 4 quarters of football, I would even go and watch it.
Wanderers versus Tiwi, sure to be another cracking match, and that game will be live on AFLN TV. Then, of course, Gray, the next day, well, it's going to be called Milestone Day. It's a massive day, not only for St Mary's, but also for the NTFL. Iggy Vallejo, he's a household name amongst NTFL supporters, and he celebrates his 300th game.
Fantastic achievement. Only the 4th player in 100 years of top-end football to play 300 games is Ignatius Vallejo, so I'm sure there'll be a big crowd out there to watch the Nightcliff St Mary's game, and probably more than a half, I think, will be St Mary's fans.
And St Mary's also not short of milestones themselves, 150 for their skipper Peter McFarlane, and they do it on Damien Hale's turf. I feel like that adds another sort of level to this story, Gray.
There's a fair bit of spice out there anyway, I think, Dave. I think if you go behind the scenes and talk to certain people, so it'll be a great game, 1 versus 2, and as you say, a combined 450 games there being for St Mary's, so huge day of football. And
Nightcliff have a really good record at home, Gray. Are they any chance of knocking over the top of the table Saints on Sunday?
Well, you would think so, although there is doubt on the big ruckman Gilhouse playing. I think his availability is in question, so he'll certainly be a loss. His height around the ground. But St Mary's, of course, I think every player on the St Mary's list wants to play in this particular game. So I think you'll see a very strong St Mary's side.
Huge game, that game at BMI Oval on Sunday afternoon. And of course there is one other game that we haven't mentioned as yet. The Buffaloes taking on Palmerston. That game will be live on AFLN TV from 5:30 on Saturday. You and I, Gray, I think on the call, is it?
Yeah, you and I will do that game. We'll probably do the late game even, if we're doing the Wanderers game, are we?
Yeah, we are doing the Wanderers game. It should be a couple of good games, but Buffaloes, are their finals chances gone, Gray?
Well, I picked them to make the finals, didn't I? But disappointing loss last week. They had more than their fair share of the football, and to beat St Mary's for the first time in 9 years, losing that particular game makes it very hard. They've got to win all 3 and rely on other teams around them losing, so very tough road home for the Buffaloes, including this weekend's game, of course, because Palmerston equally desperate to snap a 2-game losing streak.
Amazing that Palmerston, with not too many minutes to go, hit the front against Districts, and suddenly they look like they may have a hold on third spot. Now suddenly they're outside the 5. It's just such an incredible season of football, and that's how close it is, isn't it, Gray?
Been an amazing season of football, top-end football, and the fans have certainly got their money's worth. It's going to go right down to round 18, I think, before we find out who's playing in the elimination final.
Buffaloes and Palmerston from 5:30 on AFL NTV. Make sure that you tune into that one. But let's take a quick look at the ladder. And we can see here St Mary's well and truly on top of the ladder, 10 points clear of Nightcliff. Then Districts, who are a game clear in third now, Gray, courtesy of that win that they just scraped across the line on the weekend. Wanderers suddenly in fourth position. And then the Bombers, Palmerston Buffaloes and Waratah sitting outside the 5 at the moment. Wanderers were the big mover from the weekend.
Yeah, but I was talking to Dean Rioli earlier this week. He thinks if his side can beat the Buffaloes, and there has to be a loser, you would think, between Wanderers and the Tiwis, unless it's a draw, of course, then they'll be back in the 5 at Palmerston, and Dean Rioli will be quite happy with that, I would say.
Still anyone's game at this late stage of the season, Gray, and it should be another cracking weekend of football. Make sure you get down to the grounds if you can. TIO on Saturday or Nightcliff on Sunday, but if you can't, we've got 2 games, a doubleheader on AFL NTV, the Buffaloes and Palmerston, and then of course Wanderers and Tiwi. So tune in for all that action live on AFL NTV, or get down to the ground. But from us here today, we'll see you next week on DK and Gray.